Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, October the 8th, 2021. It is currently 9:10 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you from the empty sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church, located right here in the middle of nowhere, Texas. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're going to find this to be a very informative and interesting conversation. I will say this right from the beginning, that there is a little bit of frustration that is leading me to turn on the microphone right now. A little bit of frustration, a little bit of irritation, a little bit of aggravation. I could use all kinds of words. I won't say anger. It's more just frustration, irritation, maybe disappointment, maybe almost you start getting those feelings like almost a depression. You're just like, oh boy, here we go again. Not this again. Please, not this again. But that's how it feels. Let me explain by laying down some rules that I've tried to live by and I try to operate by. And I try to even conduct this podcast following some of these basic rules. And anyone who's been a long-time listener of mine, you definitely know, you're going to know these points because you've heard me talk about them in a number of ways. All right. So I'm going to go through just these really quick. Just listen to this. This is going to lay a very important foundation for what we're getting ready to discuss. And I'm going to do my very best to try to demonstrate patience and understanding, because I think that's the only way to move forward in this discussion, so that I can hopefully benefit as many people as possible. I'll say this before I go through these points. In every discussion, disagreement, or debate, there is a line, there is a point that if that line is crossed, or if we reach that point in the discussion, in the debate, in the disagreement, I usually say, well, that's it. Done. Forget it. Because at that point, once that line is reached, once that point is reached, it demonstrates to me that now what we're engaging in is an exercise in complete futility, that it's a waste of everyone's time. Even though I believe that in this current discussion and debate about, well, if you've been, well, we're in part 2. If you listen to part 1, I'm currently basically involved in a disagreement, a debate, a discussion about the doctrine of salvation. Are we saved by grace alone, through faith alone, because of Christ alone, or are we saved through Christ and repentance and works, and kind of this weird mixture? So there's a debate going on. But if we reach a certain point, if we reach a certain line, then to me at that point there's no point in going on, because I'm just wasting everyone's time. But I am trying to convince myself that even though we've reached that point in this discussion, even though we've reached that point, that I should proceed, because one, I'm hoping, praying that the person that I am engaged in this disagreement with will really stop and go, wait a minute. I think he's right. I really believe that it's my responsibility to try to go, hey, come on now. Even if we don't agree, you can't do that. You cannot do that. And hopefully this will serve. So number one, I really want to try to, maybe wake up the person I'm disagreeing with to really reconsider some things. But hopefully it can serve as a lesson to all of you. Maybe someone will learn something in this. If one person is helped, then I hope that I'm not engaged in an exercise in futility. But once you start feeling that, like, wait a minute, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time here. That's a feeling you don't want to be in, especially when you're driving 20 minutes, setting up your podcast equipment, spending hours broadcasting, driving 20 minutes back home. You start really, wait, what am I doing? What am I really accomplishing something? So I'm hoping that this will benefit someone. But here are the rules I operate by, all right? This is all going to make sense. Just stay with me, all right? Here's rule number 1. Everyone knows this rule. Everyone who knows me knows I live by this. Pursue truth at all cost. Pursue truth at all cost. I have lived by that my whole Christian life. My salvation happened in a Baptist church, but was I satisfied to just listen to what the Baptist said? No, because I continued to pursue truth and ask questions and questions and questions and questions, which led me to leave the Baptist church and join a Lutheran church. But was I satisfied to just go with what the Lutheran said? No, I pursued truth and ended up going back to a Baptist church. In other words, what I'm trying to say is pursue truth at all costs. And sometimes it can cost you because if you're on whatever team you're supposedly on, like it or not, Christianity is very tribal. You have your tribe, your group, your team, and you've got to stay in line with everyone, because if you question it, then you're not really welcomed on that team anymore. But I've always said, whatever it costs me, pursue truth. But I want to emphasize, not just pursue every crazy idea, pursue truth. The issue is truth, not every crazy theory out there. Pursue truth. That's going to be very important in this discussion. So pursue truth. Now, the person that I'm debating and discussing these issues with currently about salvation, I'm going to believe that they are pursuing truth and that they're doing their very best. I'm not going to assign any wrong motives to them, but I'm going to believe that we are like-minded individuals who are trying to pursue truth. And if that is true, if we are both trying to pursue truth, then that line that I talked about should never be crossed. Just continue. So that's rule number one, pursue truth. But I've always tried to follow rule number one, pursue truth at all costs, with rule number two. Never forget that I'm fallible. Pursue truth, but never forget that I am a fallible person. That means whatever I understand today is not an infallible understanding. Whatever conclusion that I've come to today is not infallible. So pursue truth with this idea that I'm fallible. Whatever I understand could be wrong. So always be willing to have your thoughts changed. In other words, never come to a conclusion that, hey, I've got it all figured out. Everyone else is wrong. I've got it figured out. Always go, this is what I believe today, but I'm a fallible human being. I'm a fallible. So never think that all have arrived and you've got it all figured out, because the minute you start acting that way and thinking that way, well, you become unteachable. Basically, you basically become the Pope. You now think you're the infallible magisterium and you have the infallible magisterial authority to tell everyone else that they're wrong. Pursue truth, but always remember that I am not infallible, that I'm very, very, very fallible. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to defend what I believe right now, but I'm defending what I believe right now in the back of my mind. However, I'm fallible. So number one, pursue truth. Number two, never forget that I'm fallible. And number three, this goes right along with number two. All of these build one after the other. Number three, always be willing to be challenged and to change. I've always tried my very best to be willing to be challenged by any perspective. Now, I may disagree, like you may give me a perspective and I may immediately disagree with you and may argue with you, but you can be 1,000% assured that when I walk away, I'm going to be like, okay, all right. They gave that argument in a very poor way. They debated. That was horrible debating skills. But I'm going to go home and I'm going to consider this position and I'm going to read the best source of information I can, putting forth that idea. I'm going to look at the best information and I'm going to challenge myself again. I may be 1,000% convinced that view is wrong, but I will go try to find the best source of information to have myself challenged again. And here's the reason I operate that way. Someone may put forth an argument, but they're not a very good debater. They make millions of mistakes in their debating. They're just very poor at it. They're not very good at it. But you can never disregard a point of view because of the quality of the one arguing for the position. Just because someone is a very bad debater and they're not very good at a very good communicator at putting forth their idea, the idea could still be right, even though I may be able to dismantle the person presenting the position. In other words, someone may be able to present a position. They do a horrible job. I can destroy them, quote unquote, win the debate, but that doesn't mean that their idea is not right. It just means they're not very good at putting it forth, or they don't know how to do research, whatever the case may be. So I always then say, okay, forget how it was communicated. Let's look at the idea. Forget the personality, forget the communication. What was the idea? Now, and then I go and consider and always try to reconsider it. And this has led me multiple times to change my positions. I went from believing the Baptist view of baptism to the Lutheran view of baptism, back to the Baptist view of baptism, because I tried to read the best information I could on the situation, on the topic, and was willing to go back and forth. I've changed my view on so many issues throughout my Christian life because I'm always willing to be challenged. And this is very true as a podcaster. I don't ever want to be the person who hides behind a microphone, it's easy to do. You turn on the microphone, you say whatever you want, and you can just disregard anyone who challenges you. I don't have to respond to comments. I don't have to respond to emails, but I always try to go, okay, let's listen to what they have to say. I always am willing to be challenged. Now, sometimes I feel like that the people challenging me, they don't seem to demonstrate that same willingness. They almost come at it like I'm infallible, I'm right, you're wrong, and everyone else is wrong. And once someone begins to demonstrate that, you're like, well, is there any point in having a discussion? Are other people willing to do that as well? But you know what? It doesn't matter. If other people are unwilling to do that, I must always try my best to go, okay, there's the idea. Let's consider it again. And what I always try to do is whatever conclusion that I came to, let's say yesterday on a subject, I'm willing to be challenged again today on the very same subject, because the conclusion I came to yesterday was a conclusion came to by a fallible person. I've never reached an infallible conclusion on anything, because whatever conclusion I come to was arrived by a fallible person. Therefore, all of my conclusions are fallible because I came to the conclusion myself. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. In other words, I always have to be willing to be challenged, because whatever I understand today is understood by a very fallible person. So I'm always willing to be challenged. So those are very basic rules. Pursue truth, never forget that I'm fallible, and always be willing to be challenged. But this is where the line is drawn in the sand. And this is where you will hear me become the most passionate and sometimes hear anger in my voice. This is so important. This is number 4, all right? Number 1, pursue truth. Number 2, never forget you're fallible. Number 3, always be willing to be challenged. And number 4, never, ever use misinformation, misrepresentation, conspiracy theories, lies, and half-truths. Don't do that. I don't care what I believe. If I start utilizing misinformation, misrepresentation, lies, and half-truths and crazy conspiracy theories, if I start utilizing that, then no, that's a line too far. That's when the point, that's no. It's no. I'm not going to do that. And this has led me to have major issues with so many people. I've stated this so many times. I don't care who the preacher is. I don't care how much I agree with them. I may think that their theology is spot on, but if at any point they stand and they put forth some information where they misrepresent a doctrine, they use misinformation, they use fraudulent information, they use lies, they use myths, they misquote people, I am going to call them out, even if I agree with their conclusion. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard a pastor say something about Satanism, or about Anton LaVey, or the Satanic Bible, and it will be a complete misrepresentation. I don't agree with Anton LaVey. I mean, he's dead now, but I don't agree with the Satanism of Anton LaVey. I don't agree with the Satanic Bible. But guess what? I've heard misquotations, and I'll go and I'll grab the Satanic Bible and go, here's the actual quote. Read it in context. You completely misrepresented that. That's unacceptable. I don't care. I got so frustrated with Protestant preachers misrepresenting and misquoting Catholic sources and Catholic doctrine and Catholic theology that I went and enrolled in a Catholic university to pursue a degree in Catholic theology just for one particular reason, so that I would have knowledge, so that when this misrepresentation occurred, I would call them out for it. Now, as soon as I do that, you're like, oh, so you're a Catholic. You're a Catholic. No. It doesn't mean I'm a Catholic. It means I'm not going to allow you to misrepresent and lie about what Catholics actually teach or misquote. I don't care if it's the Catholic Catechism. I don't care if it's a quote from one of the popes. If you misquote or misuse the quote or misrepresent the quote, I'm calling you out. It's not that I'm defending Catholicism. I'm defending truth. And if you have to misrepresent and use misinformation in order to prove your point, it means either one, your point is already fraudulent because you're using wrong information to prove your point, or at best, your use of misinformation then basically just stops the discussion about the actual point, and we've got to now go have all of these discussions about why you're using misinformation. And I've seen this over and over. I've seen pastors say things about a movie or music, and just like they misrepresent the lyrics, they misrepresent the meaning of the movie, they misrepresent the book, misrepresentation, misinformation, lies, sometimes just spreading absolute full-blown myth and hoaxes. I'll give you an example. I've said this so many times. When I first moved back here to Texas and we were looking for a church, we visited a church not too far from the building I'm currently sitting in. 4 miles away, 5 miles away. And it was a Sunday night. We listened to the sermon. At the conclusion of the sermon, the pastor wants to take a few minutes to inform everyone of a very important thing that he needs everyone to take action on. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on? And he begins to tell this story that a female atheist had started a process to remove all Christian broadcasting from the airwaves, Christian radio, Christian television, and that she was getting closer and closer to have all of Christian broadcasting banned. Now, as soon as I heard the man start talking, I'm like, wait a minute. This is a fraudulent story. This is a lie. But then he tells everyone that the story is true. And then he puts a petition up front, like there by the pulpit. He wants everyone to come sign, and they're going to send it to the government. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? The story was completely fraudulent. First, the female atheist that he was saying was doing this was dead. And two, the government had even released statements saying, hey, Christians, this is not true. You're being made out to be a fool. In fact, I think the whole thing was created by atheists just to make Christians look absolutely stupid. But here he was promoting the idea. Fraudulent, wrong, misinformation. I've heard this done over and over. Once you get into a point where people start doing that, how can we continue the discussion? How can we continue the discussion? Because now I've got to spend all of my time not talking about the actual issue. I've got to spend all of my time correcting the fraudulent misinformation that was put forth. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because we've reached this point. And at this point, I don't know how to proceed other than try to beg the person, just stop. Let me explain. To the individual that I'm currently involved in this discussion and debate on, you have put forth your understanding of justification. Your view is that we're not justified by grace alone, through faith alone, because of Christ alone, but they were justified with a mixture of what Christ did, our repentance, and then us being obedient, right? So this, and according to you, you reject pretty much everyone else. You reject Protestants, you reject Catholics, you reject Greek Orthodox, you reject everyone. So when everyone is wrong, but you, now that already is a little troubling, but that's okay. So I was going to be like, all right, I understand. I understand very much. Your position now. I got it. Now, I think it's a little, I'm put it this way. I understand what you're trying to say, and I want to work through it. But if at any point, and while you're trying to put forth your position, you also begin to put forth misrepresentation, misinformation, and lies, that's when I'm going to have to be like, look, I can't get to your doctrine of justification because I have to deal with your practice of misinformation. And that's where we have reached. And I'm very disappointed that that's where we go. But I should have realized this early on. There was a warning siren going off, and I disregarded the warning siren. And now I'm right here in the middle of this storm. And it's frustrating because I'm like, there's so many other things I could be talking about. There's so many other things I could be doing. But maybe in doing this, I can help everyone else. Maybe. Because there is a lot of this nonsense going on within Christianity of misinformation, misrepresentation, lies. And I'm always battling it. I'm always fighting it. And what drives me crazy is sometimes I have to defend people and ideas and doctrines that I disagree with, but I have to defend them against the attacks of misrepresentation and lies. In fact, right here, underneath all these stacks of books, I have an English translation of the Quran. Now, why do I have to have that? Because time and time again, Christians will say absolute lies about Islam, about what Muslims believe or what the Quran says, or they'll rip things so far out of context. Over in my book bag, I have the Satanic Bible. In fact, actually it's laying on the table down there. Why do I have the Satanic Bible? Because people will say things that are not true. I can't even tell you how many Catholic, Catholic theological works, if I can speak correctly. I mean, I've got the Book of Mormon. I've got the Jehovah's Witness translation of the Bible, the New World Translation, up there at the front table of the church. It doesn't matter. I will have every resource available to me because when people say, hey, they said this, I can be like, you are wrong. You are wrong. And it's sad because I end up defending, it's not that I'm defending Jehovah's Witnesses or defending Mormons or defending Muslims or defending Satanists. No, I'm trying to defend truth. And if you're going to attack something and you're going to be not accurate or fair, well, then that raises, everything, the whole discussion just comes off the tracks, all right? You can hear my frustration already starting to build, but I'm trying to stay calm. All right, so this all started. I'll give you the context. I've already talked about this in part one. This all started. I did a very simple, basic overview of the Lutheran belief in baptism. It really wasn't designed to be an in-depth study. But what I utilized in my discussion about the Lutheran view of baptism was, let me see, a book written about what Lutherans believe? No, because I would never do that. I actually have right here in front of me, Luther's Small Catechism, right here. All right, I've got the book of I've got all kinds of Lutheran books that we could go through, right? Books written by Martin Luther, et cetera, et cetera. I think I have the complete works of Luther, right? So, and why do I do that? Because if I'm going to talk about what someone believes, I'm going to go to the actual source, not what people say that they say, but the actual source. That's just a basic concept in research. Don't listen to what other people say about someone. Go to the original source. If you don't have the original source, I cannot tell you how many times I've been told, the church fathers said this. And I'll be like, oh, where did you get that quote? And it'll be from some website that claims that what the church father said, not the actual document or page or where the actual church father said it. It's what someone said the church father said. Well, then you're not quoting to me the church fathers. You're quoting to me what someone said the church father said. Find the original documentation. Find the original source. If you say, Anton LaVey said this, don't give me a website where they claim this is what Anton LaVey say. Show me in the actual writings of Anton LaVey. Don't tell me that this is what is said in the Book of Mormon. No, show me the actual quote in the Book of Mormon. This is not rocket science. It's very simple. Find the original source. If you don't find the original source, then you've got to be very suspect of what you are reading, because so many times you'll read even a Christian book. They'll say, so-and-so said this. And then you're like, okay, where did they say this? Right? So then you'll go, okay, let me go look up the original source. You go look up the original source. You read the paragraph that comes before. You read the paragraph that comes after. You put that quote in its original context. And you're like, well, at best, that's a misrepresentation. And at worst, that's just a downright lie. They completely lied about what this person was trying to say. And even your enemies deserve the respect to be understood properly. The Bible calls us to love even our enemies. Show love and respect by correctly representing what people have to say. Now, sometimes tracking down an original source can be very difficult when dealing with historical sources. It can be very, very difficult to track down the original historical quote, especially the church fathers. Sometimes you're like, okay, well, where did the church father say this? And you'll look and you're like, okay, what source is that? And you're like, you have to go and you have to look and like, I can't find where Augustine said this. I can't find where Eusebius said this. I can't, whoever the church father is, I can't, where did Athanasius say this? And sometimes it becomes, it's almost like trying to find, what's the famous saying, a needle in a haystack? Sometimes, it's like, where is this? And it can be very difficult. But you know what? Until you can find it, be suspect. Be suspect. And I should have been very suspect here, but I wasn't. All right, so I'm getting all kinds of notifications. I don't think anyone's disagreeing with me so far. I hope not. All right, let me do this. I'm going to turn the volume down here because I don't know if something's going to start playing. I'm going to go to our YouTube channel. All right, I'm going to go to our channel. And I'm going to go to because this is where the comments are being found. And so therefore, and the reason I'm going here is because I want everyone to know, you can go look at the comments yourself. You can go. It's underneath the video, or it's not really a video, the audio of people rejecting the doctrine of faith alone, salvation, part 1. All right. And if you go down, you'll see these comments. All right. Now, the first comment was this. All right. Let's see here. Okay. Let's see. Where's the original? Where's the original quote? All right. Where's the original quote? I got to find all of the. No, I don't want to put a comment right now. I got to find the original source here, the original quote. Okay. This one. Oh, never mind. I'm under the wrong video. That's the problem. I'm like, where is it? I got to go to, if you go to the video audio of Lutheran Doctrine of Baptism, this is where it all started. Okay. Here is the first reply. All right. The first reply, we talked about this in part 1, but this is where it all started. And this is where the warning sirens should have started going off, but I was hoping for the best. All right. I reject all of Luther's teachings, especially his faith alone doctrine of salvation. All right. So immediately you're okay. He rejects all of Luther's teachings. Now, at the bottom of this, he also rejects Protestantism, Catholicism, and Eastern Orthodoxy. All right. So that means he rejects everything. So everyone is wrong except the person who's writing this. Now, right there, just if that doesn't send off warning sirens, it doesn't. And it did. And in fact, in one of my comments, I responded going, okay, I appreciate you reaching out to me, but this is a little troubling because it just demonstrates like, hey, if you're the only one right and everyone else is wrong, then you clearly almost believe you're infallible, and that's a problem. All right, that's a problem. So that was problem number 1 that should have sent off a siren, and it did a little bit, but there was another one. All right, here we go. I was a Protestant for 35 years until I did an in-depth study of Martin Luther. Now, when someone says they did an in-depth study of Martin Luther, that tells me, oh, okay, they bought the complete works of Martin Luther and they read the works of Luther. Let me make that clear. The works, in other words, the works Luther actually wrote, because there is a source that Luther's enemies always quote. And for some weird reason, a lot of people don't understand that you keep quoting. Luther did not write that. That was compiled by people after Luther's death, and we don't even know where they got some of this information, and it's highly suspect. But so you would think that someone who studied Luther would know, okay, that source don't quote because it's suspect. Okay, here are the official works of Luther. Let me read those. So if someone did in-depth research of Luther, they would know that. They would immediately know, okay, I'm not going to quote anything from that source, and I'm not going to rely on anything that does not, I'm not going to rely on what people say about Luther. If you did an in-depth study of Luther, you wouldn't have to rely on what other people said about Luther because you would know what Luther said. You would say, here, I have his complete works. Here's page this. Here's the actual words of Luther, right? You wouldn't have to say, no, here's what someone said Luther said. You would know because you did an in-depth study of Luther. If I said I did an in-depth study of Augustine, it's not that I did an in-depth study of Augustine by reading what everyone else said about Augustine. I have to read Augustine. If I say I did an in-depth study of any of the popes, it's not I go read what everyone said about the pope. I go read everything that pope actually wrote and said. You always start, if you're doing an in-depth study on a subject, you start with the original sources. Then you back up and then may look at the commentary that other people have provided about said and so-and-so, or whichever individual that we're looking at, or whatever topic. You always go to original sources. So when someone tells me they've done an in-depth study of Martin Luther, then immediately I'm like, okay, they did an in-depth study of Luther. I'm going to just respect that and go, okay, they've been reading Luther. They've been reading Luther. Okay, so this should be interesting. They've done an in-depth study of Luther. I won't even claim an in-depth study of Luther, but I've read, I think, close to everything that I can of Luther's. I probably have missed certain, books and things, but I've tried my very best to read what Luther has said, especially on certain subjects. So then he goes on to say Luther created his German Bible, and in it, he tells people that the most important books are Romans, John, and Galatians. Now, immediately when he says, in the Bible that Luther wrote, or the Bible, I should say, the Bible that Luther translated, his translation of the Bible, he says this. Now, okay, so you're telling me, so in Luther's translation, he put study notes? So did Luther produce the first Luther study Bible? Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I'm translating the Bible into German, and in it, I'm going to place my study notes. Did Luther translate a study Bible? Have you ever seen Luther's translation? Have you ever read Luther's translation? Can you read German? When you tell me that in it, that's the exact quote, that Luther created his German Bible, and in it, he tells people that the most important books are Romans, John, and Galatians. Are you saying that that's in the footnotes, or are you saying that that was in the introduction? What exactly did Luther do to demonstrate this? In the Bible itself. He says James is a book of straw, and says about the same about Revelations, it's not Revelations, the book of Revelation, Hebrews, and Matthew, Luke, and Mark. He rejects salvation by faith and works, as James 2:24 says. Now, supposedly he does all of this in his Bible. Now, again, right there should have been like, wait a minute. Where is this rejected? And I got to find a copy of Luther's Bible. And I probably need someone who can read German, because I can't read German. So are you telling me when Luther created his German Bible, he threw in all of this additional information inside the Bible? That's the claim being made. So right there, I should have been like, highly suspect. But all right, let's continue. All right. I'm not going to read everything he says here because I want to get down to it. He goes, Luther's error and heresy is he believes not only we are not saved by works of the law, but also by obeying Christ's teaching, repenting of sin and living a holy life. In other words, we are saved by faith alone, and obeying Christ, repenting of sin and living a holy life is not required. Jesus said if we continue in sin, workers of iniquity, we would not enter into heaven. Paul said, and then he goes through and quotes a lot of this. Now, he goes on to say here, you see here. Right. He said, okay, Luther said, no sin can separate us from God, even if we commit adultery and murder 1,000 times a day. He also said, love God and sin boldly. All right, love God and sin boldly. Now, remember, in part one, as soon as I heard that, I was like, wait a minute. So I just immediately looked that up, and immediately an article came up going, wait a minute. First of all, this comes from a fragment. We don't know the context. We don't know exactly what Luther was trying to say. And so immediately there's scholarly information out there going, whoa, slow down before you start quoting this. There's some context here. And Luther could have been, we don't know exactly what Luther was trying to say. He could have been using some form of hyperbole. I'll give you an example of being able to say this. All right, I'll give you an example. I was discussing one time with someone about, I believe it's wrong to, illegally, I believe it's wrong when you illegally download music and you're breaking copyright laws and you're taking music from someone who produced it. Instead of purchasing it, you're illegally downloading it. Well, I started trying to make this argument with someone, and they just kept basically saying it's right, and the music companies have, they have enough money, and I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Fine, great. Hey, so-and-so over here, I think in his house, he has a lot of money, he has all the things. Just break in tonight and take this and take that and take this and take that. Just steal this, steal that, steal this, steal that. Now, I wasn't actually saying go and do all of that. I was like, if that's going to be your argument, then go and do it. Go and steal everything. If you believe stealing is okay in this particular case, well, then go steal everything and use the same argumentation. Now, someone could take that quote out of context and go, whoa, he just told someone to go steal. He supports stealing. No, I actually was trying to make an argument against stealing by what I was saying. So you have to have context. You have to have context. So here he provides a quote of a fragment where there's scholarly information going, that's not so good. So right there should have been, okay, already we're already getting close to that line. And I was already starting to get bothered. But then, oh boy, this is where everything goes off the rails. All right. Under the video or audio on YouTube, people rejecting the doctrine of faith alone salvation, I received a message. In fact, it's actually in my email. I don't know if it's actually showing up on YouTube yet, but I'll just read what showed up in my email. All right. The person wrote, I received this 5 hours ago, 4:40 a.m. All right. Here's what I received. Here is documentation of Martin Luther's quotes and the outrageous things he said and taught that you asked for. All right. Now, wait a minute. Okay. I was excited. Someone is going to send me documentation of all of Luther's quotes. I'm like, whoa, all right. So here's a link. So I'm assuming that this is going to be a link to Luther's works, right? If you're going to give me the quotes from Luther's works, this is going to be it's going to be a link, I don't know, to either a PDF file going, okay, here's Luther's works. Okay, here's the work. Here's the page. Here's the quote. Here's the context, right? I mean, that's, remember, this person did in-depth study of Luther. He spent, I guess, years doing in-depth study of Luther. So it should be very simple. He's read all of Luther's works, right? I mean, that's doing in-depth study. So I click on the link and lo and behold, guess where I am taken to? I immediately look at this website and I'm like, wait, what the heck is this? All right, what the heck is this? It's something called Catholic-Saints.net. And it looks like basically like a blog that's been put together. And you start looking here and you're like, wait a minute. All right, here's some of the free videos. Doomsday predictions happening right now. Are you ready? Scientific proof for God and supernatural miracles. Francis approves of false religions and homosexuality. Pope Benedict XVI denies the faith teaching false religion saves. Martin Luther said that Christ fornicated with 3 women. Real ghosts attack people on camera. Okay. I'm like, what? Okay, I'm trying to be nice here. What the heck is this? So you send me to a very questionable website. A very questionable website where now they are going to tell me what Luther said. See, I'm not going to be sent actually to Luther's works. I'm being sent to a page telling me what Luther supposedly said. And you telling me that Luther said that Christ fornicated with 3 women. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Here we go. So immediately I'm like, all right, we've crossed the line. Now we're over here into misinformation, misrepresentation, and we're into cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs land. Now, you please know what's just happened. You now have, this person actually has hurt their position, right? Because I want to deal with your doctrine of justification, but now I got to deal with the misinformation and the fact that you just sent me to a webpage that's highly questionable, and it doesn't take long. Now the original link, I knew exactly what to do. As soon as I saw the real Martin Luther exposed, evil quotes and outrageous actions of Luther, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh boy, I know what's in it. So I just scrolled all the way down close to the bottom. I'm like, there it is. I knew they were going to throw out this argument, and which has been declared to be a myth. In fact, there have been all kinds of academic articles written about the myths related to Martin Luther, that people have made outrageous claims that are just not true. Now, here's what's frustrating. I have no desire to defend Martin Luther. I disagree with Martin Luther a lot, okay? A lot I disagree with Martin Luther on, okay? We can go all day on. There's a lot of issues I would disagree with Martin Luther on, okay? I mean, clearly I would have not been very welcomed by Martin Luther considering my beliefs, okay? But once again, I'll make it very clear. I'm only defending Martin Luther against misrepresentation. And if you're going to start using misrepresentation, we can't continue on because there's no point. Like, it becomes an exercise in futility if this is what you consider extensive research into Luther. So let's just start with the one. Martin Luther said that Christ fornicated with these women. All right, there's all kinds of documentation on this, but this is really crazy. This is really crazy. All right, so. All right. This is very important. The supposed quote about Luther claiming this, that first of all, this just disregards everything else Luther ever said about Christ. If you read Luther's sermons, his commentary on Galatians, if you just read all of his works over and over, Christ was without sin. Christ was without sin. We're sinners. Christ obeyed on our behalf. Clearly, you take any quote that supposedly comes from Luther that contradicts everything else that he said. You gotta stop and go, wait a minute. This seems to contradict everything Luther has said. And I could go through quotation after quotation, just read his commentary on Galatians. We could go all day going, wait a minute, right there. This is already like Christ committed fornication with multiple women. All right. I've got to stop here. What's going on here? So, the quote where this supposedly comes from, and there's a lot of discussion about, what is it actually saying? How do we translate this? There's a lot of discussion here. The quote is available. Let's see. It is, okay, please note. It is from Luther's Table Talk. Now, this is the source. Now, this is very important for everyone to understand. If anytime you see Catholics do this, a lot of times people who don't like Luther will pull quotes from Luther's Table Talk. I don't know why people don't understand this, but anyone who's done in-depth study of Luther should be very aware of this. Luther did not write the Table Talk. Let me state it again. Luther did not write the Table Talk. It is a collection of secondhand comments written down by Luther's friends and students and was published after his death. He didn't write it. It was published after his death. So there was no way for Luther to go, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't mean that. I didn't say that. Wait, you're misrepresenting what I'm saying. No. It would be like someone taking your words or not even taking your words. It would be like someone after you die publishing a book saying that you said this, and this. You would have no way to go, wait a minute, that's not true. That's not accurate. Because let's make it very clear. Anyone who does a lot of speaking, a lot of teaching, a lot of preaching, a lot of writing, your words can always be misrepresented. I've said things and people will say, wait, you said this. I'm like, well, okay, that's not exactly how I meant it. And sometimes I would say, well, go back to what I said 2 minutes into that podcast episode, or 12 minutes, or consider what that quote in light of everything else I've said, because you're misrepresenting me. Luther has a right to be fairly represented. All right? So that's very important, okay? And I'll just give you some basic information here. The quote does appear outrageous. Anyone who's ever read the quote, it does appear to be outrageous. It goes something like this. Christ was an adulterer for the first time with the woman at the well, for it was said, and again, these are not even the words of Luther. These are words that appear in Table Talk, which Luther did not write. But supposedly Luther said, Christ was an adulterer for the first time with the woman at the well, for it was said, nobody knows what he's doing with her, John 4:27. Again, he was an adulterer with Magdalene, and still again with the adulterous woman in John 8, whom he left off so easily. So the good Christ had to become an adulterer before he died. Now that sounds horrible. That sounds bad. So someone who's done an extensive study in Luther would go, wait a minute. All right, what is going on here? Because that goes against everything else Luther seems to have ever said about Christ and his Christology. What's going on here? Okay, first thing you would notice, wait a minute, this appears in Table Talk. He did not write this. This is a collection of secondhand comments written down by Luther's friends and students published after his death. So what do we know? Well, a couple of things. First, the quote has no context. All right, that's always important. There's no context. One does not know what exactly Luther had in mind. Was he kidding? Was he summarizing someone else's argument? Was he using hyperbole? It's really hard to say. If taken literally, it certain is at odds with other statements about Christ. Therefore, even though one can't know exactly why he said this, we can have strong assurance he didn't mean it literally. The editor of Luther's works include a footnote for this comment of Luther's, and they offer the following speculation. So there, in some of these works, there's actually footnotes by the editors. But hey, you know, why dig into this? Let's just throw some nonsense out on a website. And this website is being given to me as, hey, if you need to know Luther's quotes, here's the source. The source is a website ripping Luther out of context, and clearly don't even understand that in many cases, their quotes are coming from Table Talk, which was not written by Luther. So already this whole thing is just blowing up and becoming frustrating. But here's what the editors say. This entry has been cited against Luther, among others by, and then they name the different people who have quoted this, or have given this quote in different publications. And they give the name of the people, the name of the publication, and the date and the page numbers, all right? What Luther meant might have been made clearer, all right? And others, if, as some have indicated, the context, if we had context for the Reformers' marks. In other words, it may have been made clear if we had some context. So what was Luther talking about? If we had context, it would be made clear. And they named some people who've suggested that, which that just makes sense. The probable context is suggested in a sermon of 1536, in which Luther asserted that Christ was reproached by the world as a glutton, a winebibber, and even as an adulterer. So in Luther's sermon, he's like, this is what people were saying about him. They accused him of being an adulterer. They accused him of being a glutton. They accused him of being a drunk. They were accusing him of all these things. And this is what people would say about him. So, yes. So if we're going to go with that, Christ committed adultery here, he committed adultery here, and committed adultery here. That's possibly the context or the understanding of what Luther is going for. But we don't know. We don't have the context, and we don't even know if those are actually Luther's words. Those are words that are ascribed to him. All right. There are Roman Catholic scholars who say Catholics are using, and I'm quoting here from a Roman Catholic scholar, Thomas O'Meara, and I quote, Catholics are using inaccurately rhetorical arguments when they make the value of Luther's theology and reform depend upon his table talk language. So he says when people borrow from table talk, they're being inaccurate. They're not clearly representing what Luther thought and said. And you can't do that. You just cannot do that. So that is a major problem. Here's another one. So I'll go back to this website. All right. Now, here's what we have. Okay. So this is the website that was sent to me. Remember, this is supposedly to give me all the information I need to know about Luther. All right. Now, again, why do we have to do this? Right. Now, I asked for it because if you're going to put supposed quotes by Luther in your argumentation to justify your doctrine of justification, then you got to ensure that what you're providing is accurate. Because if I find out that all of your information is misrepresentations and lies, then why even continue with your doctrine on justification? Because now I'm going to have to spend the time demonstrating how you're misrepresenting what Luther said when we're not even talking about Luther anymore. We should be talking about your doctrine of justification. But you know what? I want to make it very clear. And this is very important, because I'm speaking now to the person who emailed me, you believe that we are justified not simply by faith alone, but by what we do, by our works. Well, if you have borne false witness against Luther, you are in sin. If you have borne false witness against Luther, you are in sin, because you're not to bear false witness against anyone. So here's this thing. Well, if you start looking, they have all these quotes, and they do have these little numbers. And if you go down to the footnotes, guess what we're going to find over and over, that some of the sources here for some of these discussions. Some of these sources are, let me see here, Table Talk. Yes, some of these sources are from Table Talk. Now, as soon as I know it's from Table Talk, I'm like, wait a minute. That is not a scholarly source to understand Luther. That is not a scholarly source. In fact, I can go to, you see here. Okay, here we go. Here's from another scholarly source. Now, in this list of quotes that this person sent to me, again, they didn't send me actually to Luther's works. They sent me to a website that has all kinds of craziness on it, all kinds of misrepresentation and misinformation on it. They sent me there to get the quotes from Luther. Now, again, just think about that. Here's the quotes from Luther. I'm not going to send you to Luther. I'm going to send you to a website that's questionable to find the quotes from Luther. That's not studying Luther. All right. But if you there's one story in it that's very crude about where Luther supposedly discovered the doctrine of justification. You've probably heard this. It's considered a myth by almost everyone, that supposedly Luther came up with the doctrine of justification while sitting on the toilet. Right. That's a lot. This is a claim going around. This crude story, this story about Luther supposedly coming to the conclusion about the doctrine of justification while sitting on the toilet. I don't know who cares where you come to the understanding? I don't even know why that matters, but it's like, oh, see, that's crude. I don't care where you're reading or where you're studying or where you're thinking or where you're meditating. The issue is whether the doctrine is true, not where he came up with it. But okay, if you want to send me to some source that wants to make a big deal out of it. And I knew as soon as I got sent the website, I knew that the story would be there. So I just scrolled right down. Look, there it is. I knew it was going to be there because it's one of those that myths that float around about Luther all the time. And every October, you start finding all of these myths about Luther appearing all over the place because nobody wants to actually fairly represent the person. So that crude story finds its genesis from an interpretation of one sentence from, are you ready for this? Come on. Table Talk. The Table Talk is a collection of second-hand comments and anecdotes written down by Luther's friends and students, published after his death. In other words, Luther didn't write the Table Talk. Every time anyone who starts investigating Luther and claims about what Luther said, every source will tell you the same thing. Luther did not write the Table Talk. Since the statements contained therein are purported to have been made by Luther, they should serve more as a corroborating secondhand testimony to something Luther is certain to have written. In other words, if you're going to have this that's supposedly Table Talk would be like, okay, this is how Table Talk could be used. Okay, I read this sermon or I read something in Luther's works. We know it's verifiable that Luther said it. It's verifiable. And I go to Table Talk, and there's a quote that's very similar to what Luther said. You can be like, okay, that may be secondhand information that backs up what Luther said, right? That may be secondhand information that backs it up, all right? So you don't go to Table Talk and find a quote that goes against everything else Luther has said, or we don't have any other information to back it up. Table Talk cannot be the primary source because it's not written by Luther. It's secondhand information written down by people claiming this is what Luther said after his death, so Luther himself could not say, no, I did not say that. So it's highly suspect just to begin with, and it could be completely misrepresenting and bearing false witness against Luther. Again, why am I defending Luther when we should be talking about this person's doctrine of justification his denial of justification by faith alone? Well, if you're saved by your works, you better do some serious repenting because I think you've probably crossed the line and you're bearing false witness against Luther. And that's the problem here. All right. So in fact, let me just go back. I'll just go back to, I gotta hurry. We're at 56 minutes. I'm trying to do this as quickly as I can. If I go back to the website that was sent to me, all right, we have this. This is from the website that was sent to me because this was going to provide me all the quotes from Luther, right? And again, the person did not send me to Luther's works. They sent me to a questionable website to try to prove what Luther said. And so I start looking around. The website has the very questionable and fraudulent understanding that Luther claimed that Jesus had committed fornication with 3 women. All right. That is highly suspect, and almost everyone realizes that goes against everything Luther ever wrote or taught. All right. But then they have this doozy. And I knew this was going to be here. This is the first one I looked for, and I have it highlighted. Luther claims that he came up with justification by faith alone while on the toilet. He claims that it came as knowledge the Holy Spirit gave me on the privy in the tower. All right. And listen, that quote that they take doesn't even come from Table Talk. They take it from another work written about Luther in 1993. So but then underneath that, they go to Table Talk. So in other words, the quote, so someone sent me to a source to find Luther's quotes, and a source that in many cases for Luther's quotes, they point to a different source other than Luther. So this is like if this was to be put down in a college paper, right? Like you were turning in a research paper. As someone who has gone to a lot of, I've got a lot of degrees and spent a lot of time in college, you would fail big time because you sent me to a secondary source that's relying on other secondary sources to somehow prove what Luther supposedly said or didn't say. That makes everything in this highly suspect, questionable, and you could be guilty of bearing false witness. So they go from the whole Table Talk thing. Now, when you start investigating the origins of this story, all right, this whole idea that he supposedly found this while sitting on the toilet. Again, there's all kinds of where did this actually, where's the origin of this story? There's lots of dispute over where this story even originated. Part of the reason people are trying to figure out when he discovered the justification of faith, and this is very important from just a Lutheran historical study. A lot of people, this is why there's a interest in this. If we can figure out when Luther came to the conclusion about the doctrine of justification by faith alone, when he came to this conclusion, this could be very helpful in how we interpret the 95 Theses. In other words, do we read the 95 Theses in light of the doctrine of justification by faith alone, or do we read the 95 Theses as someone still very much believing maybe the Catholic understanding and had not yet came to the conclusion about justification by faith alone? Trying to figure that date out is why a lot of people. So when you try to figure out the date, you try to figure out, well, when exactly did this happen? And this leads to a discussion about the place. The place. Where did this occur? All right. Now, if you start getting into this, all right, I'll try to even explain this. First, you have to know exactly we need a correct translation of it. We have to figure out exactly when this was used. And it appears that what happens is there's this abbreviation that Luther said that it occurred, where he discovered this, it occurred in or on a C, I think it's a CLCI, all right? It's like an abbreviation. It's an abbreviation. And he uses this abbreviation as the place the Holy Spirit revealed to Luther a new understanding. Now, this has caused much speculation and some embarrassment. Some later editors of the Table Talk have suggested that this CICL, this abbreviation, means toilet, all right? Others argue that, others have suggested that it means as chamber, a confined place. Others suggest it refers to basically a warmed room in which Luther studied. Right? So a lot of people are like, no, where did this happen? All right. And some believe that this was in a tower that he was at. Now, this tower where he supposedly had this revelation, there was a tower. So first of all, there's a question. Was there a tower? Was there a tower bathroom? So some people have taken this to go full in research trying to figure this out. All right. Yes, there was a tower at Luther's Augustinian monastery in Wittenberg. Some scholars have contended that there was no bathroom sort of feature in the tower at all. In 2004, though, excavation around the monastery while building a garden unearthed a stone room. There's a picture here of the excavation of this area where Luther would have been in the monastery. And some believe that they did find a toilet there, which is made out of stone blocks, and it's a 30 square, and then they go through all of it. And then they talk about it. A more recent article notes that the artifact is from the excavation. The archaeological discovery, though, does not necessarily validate that Luther's evangelical breakthrough came through while sitting on the toilet. I want to just give you all the information as possible. So they've done more digging, and they're like, okay, there appears to have been a toilet in the tower. I don't know why it even matters, but people will go, hey, that's where he was. So therefore, because he was sitting on the toilet when the idea came to him, it's all crude and wrong. I don't even know why that would even matter. But the point is, there's all kinds of dispute of exactly what's being stated in Table Talk. What's that abbreviation stand for? Does it mean that he was in a room, on the toilet? Where was he? Was he in the tower, on the tower? Where was he? There's all kinds of dispute. So the point is this: you sent me to a website that contains questionable to downright fraudulent information as the source for quotes from Luther. We cannot have meaningful discussion, dialogue, and debate if fraudulent misinformation is being cited and some of the quotes from Luther are not only from questionable sources, many of them have been listed as absolute myth, made up, fraudulent. You started with quoting the whole, hey, go, basically, believe in Christ and sin boldly. And that comes from a fragment, and there's no context, and there's entire scholarly articles calling that into question. The source that you sent also has this nonsense about the bathroom that he was sitting on the toilet, which there's lots of discussion here about, wait a minute, what is going on here? There's there's just so much here. Yeah. I could just, there's just all kinds of questions about the whole toilet thing. And you sent me to a site that has the whole, Luther said Jesus committed fornication with 3 different women. When you send me to a website like that, I don't know if I'm dealing with someone who wants to pursue truth and cares about doctrine and cares about theology, or I'm in communication with someone who's relying on very suspect information and is not doing actually academic, scholarly research. I can spend all day with you saying, hey, let's take Luther's works, let's read them, and let's see what we agree or disagree with. But let's do this. Let's actually rely on what Luther actually said and his own actual words, and let's not rely on what other people say Luther said. Oh, here's a very good idea. And let's not rely on a source that's not actually Luther's words. It's a compilation of people's who put these things together, claiming Luther said these things, and it was published after his death. I think that's fair. And by doing this, what you've created now is you've created all of this noise that keeps us far from the actual subject that we need to be discussing. So let me summarize again. Someone said, here is the documentation of Martin Luther's quotes. And they send me to a questionable website that has clear misinformation, misrepresentation, and relying in many cases on Table Talk as a source, which anyone who knows anything about Table Talk, that's not Luther did not write it. It was put together after Luther's death, and it contains secondary information, quotes, and what people said that Luther said. And we don't even know where they derived their quotes from. We don't know if it's something that that was just going around that someone said, oh, Luther said this. Well, let me write that down. So that you're not being fair. And at that point, how can we move forward? Now, I'm still going to go through this and try to work through your understanding of justification. I'm still going to try my best because I like to be challenged, and I want everyone else listening to be challenged as well. But this is a lesson to everyone. Do not fall for this kind of sloppy academic practice. And you say, well, I'm not trying to be an academic. Well, if you're going to be researching something, there's a certain level of academic standards. That's why you learn how to write research papers in school, right? Where you have to document the source. You got to verify the source. And there's some sources that are like, no, that's the source you're utilizing for your quote. You do realize that quote. I've done this I've read so many Christian books. They'll say, so-and-so said this, right? I'll say, so-and-so said this. And then I'll go back and look at their notes. And I'm like, wait a minute. They're supposedly quoting from Augustine, but they took the quote from another book that is supposedly quoting Augustine. So they didn't verify if Augustine said this. They took this quote from Augustine from another book that was supposedly quoting Augustine. So then I'll go track down the original book, and I'm like, wait, their quote from Augustine says it's from here. Then you go look at Augustine, and like, that's not there. So where did this quote come from? And sometimes you'll realize that the author that you were reading was relying on a secondary quote that someone said it, and then you go try to find the original quote, and you cannot find it. You cannot find it. You cannot find it. And when at that point you look foolish, you look like you're not being accurate. I'll end with this. I learned this lesson. I don't know how old I was. I was relatively relatively young. And I was having I'll explain. I used to, after I became a Christian, I would try to go to the different libraries in our city. There was a library on the campus of McMurray University, which is a Methodist university. There's a big library on ACU, which is the Church of Christ University, and there's a big library at Hardin-Simmons, which is the Baptist University. And then we had the city public library downtown. And I would go to these libraries because I didn't have money to just find every theological work and read. At the city library, every like Tuesday or Thursday night, I don't even remember what night it was, all these people would come walking in and they would go to like the theology section. And I noticed, wait, they're all wearing white ties and they got these little name tags on. Who are these people? And I found out that they were Mormons. And I remember having some back and forth with Mormons. And I remember stating something to them that, hey, the Book of Mormon says this or the Book of Mormon says that, because I'd read it in a book. And one of the Mormons pointed out, no, I've got the Book of Mormon right here. It's not in the Book of Mormon. That's a lie. And I will never forget how stupid I felt, how foolish I felt, how embarrassed I was. And what made me mad is I had gotten that information from a Christian book about Mormonism. And that Christian book gave me a lie. It ticks me off to this day that I cannot trust Christian books. So he gave me a Book of Mormon. I read the entire Book of Mormon, and guess what? He was right. It was a complete lie. An absolute, complete lie. And a Christian book. You cannot do that. You can't say, oh, you want some quotes from Luther? Well, here's a website that supposedly has the quotes from Luther. And then it takes 5 seconds to look at the website and going, yeah, and they're putting forth lies that are been and scholarly studies demonstrated to be questionable at best. You look at the source they're utilizing, Table Talk, and you're like, clearly this site cannot be trusted. So that's that's misinformation. That's misrepresentation. That's not the way we can move forward. Don't do that. Check the source. Pick up an actual, Luther wrote it. Like right here, I have Luther's catechism right here. Pick up what Luther actually wrote. Now, by all means, check Table Talk. But use it as a secondary source. Here's what other people said Luther said. Here's what other people, in fact, let me do something really quick. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'm going to verify something. 1 second here. One second. All right. Okay. Here you see here. I'm gonna verify something. Okay. See here. Okay. Yes. Table Talk is a collection of sayings around the dinner table at Luther's home, but also at other times and locations such as walks in the garden or notes taken while on journeys. It is based on notes taken by various students of Luther between 1531 and 1544. All right? Other earlier note takers had written down only the serious remarks of Luther, but they also wrote down other things that supposedly Luther wrote. So you could go through it. So I just wanted to verify that that's accurate. I'm going to do something else here. See here. Okay, here's another documentation, and I hate to be spending the time on this, but I just have to do this. Okay, the Table Talk consists of transcriptions of some of Luther's discourses while at table, written down by various regular guests at his home. In the American edition, 9 different men who recorded Luther's sayings are represented. The history of the Table Talks is well described in an extensive introduction in this volume. In general, it's important to note that these sayings of Luther are not accurate to the word transcriptions of what Luther said, unlike what a modern-day court reporter provides to the public record, or the replay-able recording, which technology allows us to accomplish in the classroom or at a speech. The Table Talks were made up of shorthand notes that later were fleshed out by authors. So I want you to even hear that. This is just very important. They were just shorthand notes, and then someone else came along and fleshed them out. All right, so I cannot even describe to you that why that could never be a primary source. All right. And then there you go. And so there's lots of documentation about the Table Talk. These are what they are. They were like, oh, someone heard Luther say something. They scribbled a little note. And at some point, these notes were put together and then fleshed out by other authors. You're not getting an accurate representation. So if you give me a quote that comes from Table Talk, no, I'm just going to reject it. Let's go to what Luther actually wrote and see, does that coincide? Does that agree with what Luther stated where we know it's actually Luther? I'm going to judge Table Talk by what I know Luther said. I'm not going to try to determine what Luther said from Table Talk, which is not actually his words. It's what people say that he said. And even that is secondhand little notes just scribbled down, and then people had to flesh them out. Those, if you don't see the problem with that, then I don't know. I don't know what to do. And again, the only reason I'm bringing any of this up is it crosses that line. Hey, here's your quotes from Luther. Okay, wait, and I look at the website, and it contains things that have been classified as a myth and as lies and misrepresentations by lots of people. And you've already did that a little bit with the whole go sin boldly thing, which again is a fragment, and we don't even have context. And a lot of people think that once you put that in context, it's probably not exactly what he meant the way that it said, because it goes against other things that Luther had said. And if it goes against other things Luther has said, you've got to know exactly what you're talking about. There's so many times in using discussion or rhetoric that you'll say something like, oh, okay, that's your point. Well, then do this. Go do this. And you're trying to make a point. That's why you've got to have context. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's forget what Luther said, because Luther is not the issue here, right? I mean, by all means, we can consider Luther's theology, but the issue is we've got to take your doctrine of justification that you've put forth, and we got to see if it logically holds up and biblically holds up, and if it makes any sense. And how can anyone know they're saved? Because according to you, we have to obey Christ's teaching. I would believe that Christ is opposed to lying. I believe the Bible says do not bear false witness. And you're engaging, if not outright, in misrepresenting and bearing false witness against Luther, which is a sin. Even if we disagree on justification, let's agree on this. No one should be misrepresented. No one should ever be a victim of someone bearing false witness against them. I shouldn't. You shouldn't. I don't care who they are. I don't care if they're a criminal. I don't care if they're an atheist. I don't care. Everyone deserves to be fairly represented and their views to be correctly understood, not misrepresentation and not lies. And if you, according to your own claim, did extensive study in Luther, then you would have known, wait a minute. Let's not rely on anything on Table Talk. Let's not do this. And you definitely would not have pointed me to a highly suspect website. You would have pointed me to a scholarly examination of Luther's quotes, or a scholarly examination of some of Luther's most troubling quotes, because there is no question that Luther said some pretty absolutely outrageous things that most people would say, I don't agree with that. But Luther is not the source of truth. Luther is someone who provides commentary and a theological perspective that we can consider. And I'm going to make it very clear. Luther was a sinner, like I'm a sinner, like you're a sinner, like we're all a sinner. There you have it. I hate that we spent all of that time doing all of that, but it needed to be done. It needed to be done. All right. There you go. And you can look up all of the Luther myths. There's, in fact, let me see. I'm just going to see really quick. I'm going to look here. Okay, let's see here. Myths about Martin Luther. Got to make sure you get the right Martin Luther, but okay. Right, here's a, as soon as I do that, debunking myths about Martin Luther. Martin Luther launched the Reformation. Many legends surrounding the iconic figure were spread since, and this author tells us why he decided to double check them. And you got this person who wrote an entire book going about the myths about Martin Luther. So you've had entire books written on, here are the myths, here are the lies, here are the misrepresentations, here's the lie. And I've even heard some of misrepresentations of Luther from people who believe Luther, respect Luther, think Luther was right in almost everything. And I've heard them say some of the myths, and I'm like, I don't know if that's accurate. I don't care if you're promoting Luther or arguing against Luther. The key is we have to be accurate. All right? There's so much. Okay, a lot of these are going to deal with Martin Luther King Jr., so you have to look here. There's just so many articles. All right? Yeah. I mean, there's so it's just crazy how many myths there are about Luther. There are. And I have probably been guilty of saying some things that are like, oh, well, not, put it this way. There's so many, anytime you say anything about Luther, what you almost have to do is stop and go, okay, here's what some say about Luther. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's what's questionable. And you almost have to do that because there's so much misinformation about him. But there we go. All right. Hopefully this was beneficial. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. I hope some of that was beneficial. I really hope. And you can dig in and look for more information. If you have any questions, you can email me. All right, I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. God bless.